Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages. This is Jesse with the Common Nerd, bringing you pop culture and all things dirty through a common sense lens. And it's one of them situations where you can pretty obviously tell that Dungeons and Dragons is not in a good place right now. Wizards of the Coast obviously laid off a bunch of people. Hasbro is making cuts left and right. We've heard about a lot of different types of stories about them having excess amounts of stock and merch on hand in their warehouses, which ended up leading to like a whole lawsuit from a bunch of their investors. So needless to say, Dungeons & Dragons is not in a good place right now. Boys and girls, a lot of the fans have abandoned it. There's been a lot of criticisms about all the kind of stuff that they've been doing over the last few years. And if you hadn't already heard, ladies and gentlemen, Dungeons & Dragons' ex-lead creators have joined a rival team. Yes, of course, everybody, a lot of people out there in the Dungeons & Dragons sphere know what Critical Role is very well aware of that show. Or if you've watched Vox Machina on Amazon out there, you'll know who they are as well, or at least you might. Needless to say, the rats are fleeing a sinking ship, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just the two creative leads, but we have another one that's allegedly retiring, and another one that has absolutely been fired, ladies and gentlemen. And these are some of the people responsible for some of the crazy changes that have been happening in Dungeons and Dragons over the last few years. And as a guy who is a fan of fans, it is very interesting to report on all this kind of stuff from you, especially considering all the criticisms that I've heard from so many fans over the past few years over Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of people that are near and dear to my heart absolutely love this game, and I've enjoyed playing it as well, and especially watching other people have such a good time with it, and it just makes me sad to see what a state it currently finds itself in. But hey, that's what happens when you decide to take a bunch of changes that don't make your fans happy, and you decide to go with your own ideas, your own narcissism, and your own ego, opposed to actually understanding what your customers want, what your fan base desires, and what has always worked for you in the past. Because as you can see over here from wargamer.com, Dungeons & Dragons and Meltdown as ex-lead designers join rival Daggerheart. And you've also got another one over here from Fandom Pulse. Dungeons & Dragons Vice President Jess Lazillo announces retirement after multiple high-level exits from the brand. So needless to say, boys and girls, there's also one of their lead, literally like their head marketing person for Dungeons & Dragons has now also been laid off. So if you didn't like a lot of the marketing that been surrounding Dungeons & Dragons lately, well, guess what? That is the person responsible for all this kind of stuff, and they have officially been fired. So we're going to share these articles. We're going to get into all of the juicy details, show you, of course, what the current state of Dungeons & Dragons is and where all of these people are going, if they're going anywhere, that have now left the company, left that sinking ship that is Dungeons & Dragons over there at Wizards of the Coast. And, of course, let you know some of the history of what has led to this and some of the backlash that has gone on with fans as well, in case this is the first time you are not knowing about all of that. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing. We just crossed 2K. We're inching our way towards 2,100. I think we're like 2029, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, if there's a comment in the section down below, does this surprise you at all that so many of these high-level executives are fleeing Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons for essentially either retirement or much better prospects going on out there? Or do you think this is just a sign that maybe these people are done and it's actually Dungeons & Dragons will be just fine after all of these cutbacks and changes in leadership? Or maybe it's for the best and you actually might be able to see a good return to form of Dungeons & Dragons going into the future. Let us know what you think about all that in the comment section down below. If you'd like to support the channel, please check out the links in the description. Think about becoming a member. For just $5 or less a month, you can get your name at the end credits and keep the lights around here indefinitely. So please think about checking out that as well. All right, we're going to check out wargamer.com here first, and then we'll jump over to Fandom Pulse for a little bit of the history and the backstory that Wargamer doesn't really bring up here. Dungeons & Dragons and Meltdown as ex-lead designers join rival Daggerheart. And I saw there was a great headline from a video by Clownfish TV. Go check out Clownfish TV if you haven't. They're great. Neon and Geeky Sparkles are awesome people. But they literally titled their headline of their video was did these guys just Daggerheart just stabbed Dungeons & Dragons in the back because they stole like their lead creatives. So it's absolutely hilarious. Like I love the kind of stuff. I love all the kind of back and forth over this kind of stuff because it really is. Like Daggerheart only exists because of D&D, right? That's Critical Role. They literally they got their claim to fame is playing great homebrew campaigns using the Dungeons & Dragons system. But hey, you know what? It's just like every other apprentice, right? Eventually you outlive your master. So there you go. The news comes as Wizards of the Coast lays off D&D's social video producer Todd Kenrick and franchise VPs Jess Lenzillo quits the firm, which that's what we've got. That's one of the headline over this one right here. But Wargamers got all of the layoffs and all that kind of stuff wrapped up in one nice little bow for us. So we're going to check this one out. From Timothy Linward. Thank you, Timothy. Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins, the former Wizards of the Coast game designers, director and creative director, design director, and creative director, who led development on Dungeons & Dragons 5e, have joined the rival Darrington Press, makers of up-and-coming fantasy RPG Daggerheart. Darrington Press announced that this star signing on Monday, June 16th. Coincidentally, the same day that D&D's video editor Todd Kenrick announced that he had been laid off from Wizards of the Coast, and the day after D&D's VP for franchise and product Jess Lazenlo announced she had quit her job. They are fleeing, boys and girls. They know Dungeons and Dragons is a sinking ship. And the worst part about this is Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins are the people that are almost exclusively, solely responsible for putting Dungeons and Dragons in the current state that it's in. So, hey, they're like, thanks. They're literally like, hey, we set the building on fire. Bye. Like, it's just absolutely nuts. According to the press release by Darrington Press, Crawford and Perkins will be focused on developing new game concepts, innovative mechanics, and future iterations, including upcoming expansions involving the entire slate of Darrington Press products. And literally, quite literally, they're going to do the exact same job except for Darrington Press, instead for Critical Role. Now, if Dungeons and Dragons was really in a good state, why would they go work for Critical Role? I don't know. Maybe that executive finally put his money where his mouth is, although he's probably getting paid more now, and was like, hey, I'm going to step down. I'm going to get out of the way so somebody who doesn't look just like me can come take my job and be empowered and be in charge of things. Yeah, me thinks he got a big fat paycheck from Critical Role. The pair quit their roles overseeing Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast in April this year. Perkins had been with the firm since 1997 and Crawford since 2007. Darrington Press is the publishing arm of D&D actual play series Critical Role. While it has published several RPGs, its most successful by far is the recently released Daggerheart, a D&D adjacent fantasy adventure game with its own analogs for D&D races and D&D classes. So hey, you looking for an alternative? You don't like what Wizards of the Coast is doing? Maybe Daggerheart's for you. There was another one that I promised one of my buddies earlier in the chat out there that I was going to bring up when talking about alternatives for this kind of stuff, because Ironcaster brought this up, and Ironcaster is somebody that I trust on tabletop RPGs. Shout out if you're watching my video. But there was a couple more that he recommended over here as well. One of them was, Fabula Ultima, which is one of his personal favorites, and also Shadow Dark. Those are another alternatives to D&D that one of my wonderful guys out there in the chat brought up during my live streams where I record all these videos Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. So come join us for that sometime as well, so you guys can see this live and breaking. But those were a couple other alternatives that I just wanted to make sure I brought up in the video so we could talk about them, because I promised Ironcaster I would, in case any of you guys out there that see this video are looking for alternatives. Storytelling has always been part of everything I do, and joining Darrington Press feels a bit like coming home, says Perkins. This team is passionate, wildly creative, and committed to building, welcoming, connected, yada, yada, yada. We don't care. He's gone. It's all hype. It's all that kind of sterilized nonsense. Oh, yeah, we loved what we did at D&D. It was such a pleasure. It was such an honor for them to give us all the tools and talent and give us all the reputation to be able to completely and totally destroy a franchise that so many people loved. And now we're on to greener pastures. Bye. Have fun. See ya later. So while an ex-D&D staffer are joining Darrington Press, D&D publisher Wizards of the Coast continues to shed veteran employees. Jess Lenzillo announced on Sunday that she had quit her role as the VP for franchise and product retirement. So literally, she's the VP for franchise and product. This is a lady in charge making decisions about the direction and the future of Dungeons and Dragons. This is the person responsible for the current state of what it is. And guess what? Bye. The real question is, was this a quitting, a retirement, or was it a retirement from Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast? Makes me wonder. But needless to say, she says on the post on her LinkedIn, she says her role, it was either the best job title ever invented or proof that late-stage capitalism had finally achieved absolute absurdity, essentially saying there's no reason this job should even exist. let alone the fact that she got to do it. And you know what? At least she's appreciative. I like that. She's classy. I like that. I've been ridiculously fortunate for those 8 years, and now I'm lucky enough to yet again get to choose my own plot twist. That's cute. I get what you're saying, though. Good for you. Todd Kendrick announced he had been laid off, i.e. fired, from his role as a video content producer for D&D marketing on Blue Sky, because of course he's on Blue Sky, on Monday, stating, "I've been laid off from D&D. Thank you to Chris Perkins, Jeremy Crawford, and the entire D&D team for being some of the kindest, most talented, and passionate people I've ever known. This was my dream job. The tabletop community has given me everything." Oh, we love it. Isn't that fabulous? Isn't that simply wonderful, boys and girls, as he announces it on Blue Sky? So needless to say, this is the guy that was the video content producer for all of the marketing. Now, I don't know how many decisions he was actually making, but needless to say, this was the guy producing all of that kind of stuff. So Wizards of the Coast has lost a lot of veteran staff in the last 2 years. This was most obvious when owner Hasbro made cuts across the organization to deal with unprofitability in its toy business in December 2023, affecting many D&D staff. Because guess what? That's what Dungeons & Dragons falls under. It's a toy. It's part of Hasbro's toys. And guess what? It wasn't selling. Now, they never specified, they didn't break it down by segments, but it was very obvious by some of the things that we've seen over the last few years. In October 2024, the firm let go Dixon DuBois, a key figure who helped rebuild community trust after the OGL debacle. Yeah, how'd all that go? And in April 2025, many staff were assigned the Project Sigil virtual tabletop project were fired. This has been an absolute bloodbath over there at Dungeons & Dragons. Like, it has been absolutely insane, all of the people that have been fired over there. I mean, this is what happens when you produce a game and you make drastic changes to things, plus make all of your current fan base upset with the OGL nonsense, and you turn all the fans off. They don't want this anymore. They don't like the changes you've made. They don't like the criticisms. They don't like all the literal preaching too that you've been trying to do in these games. It's absolutely insane. And that brings us to the history. So that's the current state of Wizards of the Coast. And this is one of the things. And you know what? Whether you like this word or not, it's politics. It's political correctness from the 90s. Woke is just the new word for it. It's the exact same thing that said we couldn't make jokes about certain people because that wasn't very nice. We have to be politically correct. All it's done is turn into the word woke. It's the exact same spirit of the age that we were battling in the 90s and the early 2000s that we are dealing with now. It's no different. Woke's just the new word for it. But this is what it comes down to, right? Because now that they've moved over, there we go. They got all their comments. This is the things, right? Their statements offer sanitized opinions that sound very corporate and don't say much, if anything, about Critical Role's Daggerheart. A new alternative to that. Though if they're hiring the same people who worked on the 2024 edition, why is an alternative even necessary? Neon observed in a Critical Role. Here we go. This is what we need to talk about here. This is the history of Perkins and Crawford's. Perkins and Crawford bear direct responsibility for transforming D&D from a game about heroic adventures into a vehicle for social justice messaging, i.e. political correctness. And they will educate you. They will try to make you one of theirs. Actually, after all, that's what cults do. Under their stewardship, the 2024 Monster Manual, brought to life by Crawford and Perkins, these guys that just jumped ship, became so sanitized that it didn't even include orcs as monsters. Apparently because depicting them as evil and creatures is somehow racist. This absurd decision strips away one of the fantasy's most iconic antagonists in a move that baffles players and DMs alike. But oh, it's not done there either. Even more egregious is their gender swapping of established creatures. Dryads, traditionally depicted as female nature spirits in mythology and decades of D&D lore, have been reimagined to include male versions. Hags, whose very name derives from the concept of an evil old woman, have similarly been subjected to gender revision. These changes serve no narrative purpose beyond checking diversity boxes and demonstrate the designer's willingness to sacrifice coherent world building for political correctness. And this is exactly what it is. This is what we've seen. This is what we've seen them turn everything into. Because it's one of them situations where things got even worse from that. The 2024 edition's problem extended far beyond missing orcs and gender swap monsters. The entire design philosophy reflects these men's beliefs that D&D needed to be fixed or to align with contemporary social justice values. They removed elements that they deemed problematic while inserting modern political concepts that make little sense in a fantasy game. As Neon concluded, I will give pass to Daggerheart before I give a pass to D&D. Anyway, because this is a new system. And that's what they're getting replaced by. And you know, it's so funny to think of Critical Role and like everything they did and how they made all their money and how they became famous and everything else. And they did it on the backs of Dungeons and Dragons. And honestly, on the backs of all of you fans of Dungeons and Dragons out there, right? Because yes, you have to have good storytelling to bring somebody in, but you guys were fans of Dungeons and Dragons first. That's why probably most of you even gave them a shot. Or maybe you liked Vox Machina and maybe you went back and subscribed to them via that way. But at the end of the day, boys and girls, Perkins and all of the rest of these people are the executives. These were the people in charge. These were the vice presidents. These were the people responsible for destroying and making all of these massive changes to Dungeons and Dragons that the majority of fans didn't want. And now that they've set the whole game on fire, now that they've pissed off most of the fandom, they've literally soaked the entire building in gasoline and then got a better paying job somewhere else. And as they walk out the door, they flick the match over their shoulders. I don't know how long this was in the process, but whether or not they were believed in all of this ideology, whether or not they stuck with it or not, whether they believed that it was all true, I have no idea. Maybe they were trying to be PC and get along with the new mind think and everything else. But if that's the case, those are the kind of cowards you don't want working for you to begin with, because they're not going to stand up for the fans, they're not going to stand up for the audience, they're not going to stand up for the customer. They bowed down to the cult and they decimated and destroyed what was one of the longest running, one of the OG tabletop RPG out there, boys and girls. Not only did they destroy what everybody loved about it, not only did they make all these politically correct choices, decisions, and changes, they also disrespected the original creators as well. So you know what, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, as one fan to another, I hope this is a turnaround for Dungeons and Dragons. But at the end of the day, some of these people are fired, some of these people are gone, and although they probably got a sweet package to leave, at the end of the day, they are gone from Dungeons and Dragons, and it's rats fleeing from a sinking ship, because even they know the devastation and the damage they have done. Dungeons and Dragons has a very grim future, and it's these people that were responsible for it, because at the end of the day, fans decides what succeeds and what fails, and clearly, fans are fleeing from Dungeons and Dragons as well, just like all the people responsible for destroying it.